Caleb Martin hadn't said a word in 3 days, not since the incident in Hangar 9, and now he's gone. No resignation, no transfer order, just ... gone. Vanished after leaning in close to Lieutenant Brody's ear, eyes bloodshot and unblinking, and whispering something no one else heard. Brody collapsed minutes later, not from injury, no, from whatever truth was passed between them. And you're going to sit there and tell me this is just another glitch in protocol. You're not supposed to be watching this footage. I'm not supposed to be sending it, but screw the clearance levels. Look closer. The timestamp says August 2nd. That's 4 days before the report claims she even arrived on base. And yet there she is, standing barefoot in the middle of the runway, covered in soot, blinking at the security lights like they'd woken her from somewhere far deeper than sleep. No ID, no explanation, no injuries, just a mouth that wouldn't close, lips dry from screaming something her throat no longer had the strength to repeat. When they tried to question her, she kept repeating 2 words, same tone, same pitch, like a metronome broken by grief. He's listening. Her name, they would learn, was Tessa Monroe, civilian, no flight background, no military affiliation. The system had no record of her ever existing, yet somehow she wore dog tags belonging to a man who died in 1996, Captain Henry Rourke, the man who supposedly crashed over the Bering Sea and was declared no remains, no black box, no wreckage, just ... silence. And now his tag, around her neck. Still warm when they pulled it off. What happened next shouldn't be possible. Tessa was escorted into a holding room, trembling eyes tracking something no one else could see. They brought in behavioral analysts, chaplains, even tried sedation. Nothing worked, until one of the rookies, some hotshot pilot named Drew Halstead, joked that maybe she belonged in the cockpit, that maybe that's where he was listening from. They laughed. Nervously, sure, but they laughed, until she looked up and said one word, open. The base went silent. Orders were given, then rescinded, then reissued. No one wanted responsibility for what followed. But within the hour, Tessa was being walked across the tarmac, surrounded by armed escorts who looked more like pallbearers than soldiers. She didn't resist, didn't blink, didn't speak, just walked calmly, like she'd done this before, or had been waiting her whole life to do it again. The hangar doors opened to reveal an old FA-18 Hornet that had been decommissioned for over a decade. Engine rusted, no electronics, nothing functional. But when she stepped inside, the damn thing powered up like it had been flying just yesterday. Full ignition, HUD online. Comes humming. The mechanics swore the battery was still missing. By the time they reacted, the hangar doors had shut, locked from the inside, and the speakers, those old static-ridden overheads no one used anymore, buzzed to life with a sound no one could explain. Not a voice, not exactly. More like a hum, like deep pressure building behind your eyes. And then, clear as water through bone, a man's voice said her name. She hadn't told them her name. A technician fled. Another fell to their knees. One officer started sobbing and couldn't stop until they sedated him. It's all in the logs, if you can find them, if they haven't been erased yet. But the rest of us watched as the cockpit closed, and she placed her hand on the throttle with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times maybe in a life no one remembers. And just before the hangar's windows shattered from the pressure, the jet lifted without fuel, without clearance, without reason. And every sensor across the base recorded something that still can't be explained. An electromagnetic burst exactly synchronized with her heartbeat. They grounded all flights for 2 days after, sent people home, said it was an atmospheric test malfunction. They lied. Of course they lied. But you're not here for their version, are you? Because here's the part no one knows, not the news, not the brass, not even the people who were there. Exactly 12 minutes before she entered that cockpit, a baby was born in the base infirmary. A Navy wife, 34 weeks along, sudden labor, perfect delivery, healthy child, but the baby spoke, clear as day. One word. Tessa. Now ask yourself the question no one's had the courage to speak aloud. Who forced her into that cockpit? And what was she bringing back? The baby didn't cry. That's the part no one mentions. Nurses swore they heard the word. A single name spoken from a mouth that hadn't drawn its first breath. Tessa. Some claimed it was audio feedback, that maybe a name came through the overhead paging system, but the hallway mics had been off. Disconnected. The old PA had been dead for months, scrapped during the last upgrade, and yet, the audio file exists. Buried deep in the archived diagnostics folder from a nearby supply closet, a maintenance tech named Marlon Ferris found it 3 nights after the incident. He wasn't supposed to be combing through old system echoes, but he was obsessive, meticulous in a way that gets people quietly reassigned. He played it back once, just once, then wiped his drive, took sick leave. He left a voicemail on his own phone, never sent, never intended for anyone else to hear. It just said, it didn't come from the baby. After that, Marlon walked off base. His shoes were still beside his bunk. ID left behind, never seen again. They didn't even put out an alert, just filed a voluntary discharge, no questions asked. You want to know what happened next? No, you don't, but you've already opened the file. You've already heard the hum, haven't you? Tessa never came back down. At least, that's the official line. But 3 days after the jet vanished, someone using her badge logged into the infirmary terminal at 2:06 a.m. There's no camera footage, just an access log with her name one that was already listed as revoked. And someone scrawled a word on the underside of the desk in red oil pencil, in jagged letters like the hand was shaking violently. Borrowed, but let's stop pretending this is just about her. Brody, the officer who collapsed after Caleb whispered to him, was discharged on psychiatric grounds. But before they got to him, before they drugged him and dragged him out, screaming, he started drawing the same shape over and over on the floor of his barracks room, a circle with a long split down the center. Some say it looked like a cracked eye. Others said it was just a broken seal. His bunkmate, Raiden Carlisle, still swears Brody spoke a phrase he couldn't unhear. She never existed until we opened the sky. No one knows what that means, or they pretend not to. I met Raiden 6 months later, in a bar outside Albuquerque. He was 3 drinks in, and talking like the world was ending, but no one had the decency to look up. He pulled something from his pockets, something he kept in a stained evidence bag he swore he didn't steal. A black box audio chip, burned at the edges, still warm. Her voice is still on this, he said, but when I played it later that night, in the half-light of a motel room off Highway 23, it wasn't her voice that came through. It was mine, and I don't remember saying any of it. There's this moment, right after the static clears, where you hear someone breathing like they're trying not to cry. Then a voice, my voice is, they lied about the sky. They lied. About time, I blacked out. I mean that literally. The next recording on my phone is 2 hours later. I'm staring at the motel bathroom mirror, filming myself whispering, she's still in the cockpit. But something else is flying. I don't remember filming it. I don't remember saying it. But I haven't deleted it either, because there's this sound, just under the whisper low constant, vibrating at a frequency you don't hear so much as feel behind your teeth. And if you slow the video down frame by frame, there's a flicker in the mirror, like something moved behind me, but only in the reflection. No footsteps, no shadow, just flicker. Raiden's gone now, too. Last text he sent me said, don't sleep on your back. That's when they listen. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make you understand. Because here's where it gets worse. A woman named Clarissa Holt contacted me last week. She claimed to have been stationed at that base in '97, the year after Captain Rourke died. She remembers hearing stories back then, not about a crash, but about an unauthorized flight, a jet lifting without ignition, a heat signature in the shape of a human heart, and a pilot that no one ever identified, just referred to in post briefs as the passenger. Clarissa had photos, grainy, black and white stills, taken on film, one of them showing the same cracked eye symbol that Brody drew, etched into the hangar wall like it had burned straight through the steel. No torch could have done that. She said they covered it with insulation, foam, and welded a plate over it, but she could still feel it, years later, like it was still humming. I asked her what happened to the original flight team. She said they disappeared. I said, you mean discharged? She said, no, I mean disappeared. No paper trail, no pension, no graves, just nothing. Her voice broke. We were never supposed to talk about them again, but I dream about them. I dream about her. Clarissa hung herself 4 nights later. The autopsy noted strange lesions on her inner ears, like she'd been exposed to sustained high-frequency sound. But the tape recorder in her room had no cassette, only a note. The sky is not above us anymore. So here's what I've pieced together in. You won't find this in any report, because the reports have been rewritten, over and over, until nothing true remains. There was no woman forced into the cockpit. That's the cover story. The real story is that something wanted back in. Something remembered her. Something recognized her face before anyone else ever saw it. Something used her name through a baby's mouth and set off a chain of events. So surgically precise it couldn't have been planned by human hands. A re-entry, a repossession, a haunting in reverse. Not a ghost trapped here, but a living soul returning to something dead up there. And you, why are you still listening? Why are you still here? Is it because a part of you recognizes the hum? 2. Tell me, when's the last time you slept through the night? When's the last time you looked at a photograph from years ago and didn't wonder why someone's face was missing, or worse, wrong? When's the last time you opened your phone and saw a voicemail from a number you don't know, only to find it was your own voice whispering something you can't remember recording? This isn't just a story. It's a pattern. You weren't supposed to be next, but someone called your name, and now you've heard it, haven't you? That low hum, starting again in your bones. She's not done flying. And something's still listening. He found the footage on a machine that shouldn't have worked, an archival reader buried in the old records wing, deep inside the basement, level no one had set foot in since the asbestos scare of 2011. The screen flickered to life without a power source. as if the machine had been waiting, humming in silence for someone to ask the wrong question. The timestamp read 2:06 a.m., matching the moment Tessa's access badge had pinged the infirmary. At first, the video was nothing. Static, white noise, camera feed stuttering like breath in a failing lung. But then the frame locked, sharpened, and there she was, Tessa Monroe, standing in the hallway in front of the nursery glass, watching the babies sleep. Only, she wasn't looking at them. Her eyes were tracking something just above the cribs. Something unseen, floating like dust in air no one else could feel. He leaned closer to the screen, thinking maybe, finally, here was something concrete. A moment, a proof, a captured truth. But that's when he saw it, barely visible in the reflection of the nursery glass, his own face staring back at her. Except he wasn't there. He hadn't been there. This was days before he'd even arrived. On base, before he'd ever heard her name. He replayed the footage, rewound, froze the frame, and the reflection. It was definitely him. Same jacket, same mole above the right eyebrow. Same faint scar beneath his lip from a dog bite in third grade. He was there. But he wasn't there. That was the moment he thought he understood. That was the moment the pieces seemed to fall into place. The whispers, the mirrored movements, the sense of déjà vu that bloomed like static behind his skull every time he heard her name. It wasn't madness, it was a glitch, a memory bleed, a loop. They weren't haunted, they were repeating. Something in the base had fractured time, or memory, or whatever tissue bound the two together. He wasn't witnessing something supernatural. He was caught in a pattern. Tessa wasn't the key, he told himself that. Anyway, he wrote it all down. Circled the connections on a whiteboard. Lined the events up like clock gears. August 2nd, her arrival. August 5th, the jet lifts. August 6th, Brody collapses. August 9th, baby says her name. The sequence held. It was almost clean. Almost comforting in how logical it seemed. He thought if he could find the origin point where the loop began, he could stop it. Or step out of it. Break the circuit, so he kept digging. Past the classified logs. Past the reports sealed under Joint Task Force seals. And that's when he found it, a file so old it had been transferred across 5 formats. The title read, Project, Backlight. Date, October 3, 1987. Base, classified, same coordinates. Subject, civilian aircraft sighted, entering controlled airspace. No pilot, no transponder, no heat signature. Eyewitnesses reported hearing singing from the sky. He printed every page, studied the sketches. And there it was again. The same circle with the broken center. Same as the one Brody had drawn. Same as the symbol burned beneath Hangar 9. But back then, they hadn't called it a sigil. They hadn't known what to call it. They referred to it as a containment failure. The report ended abruptly. No conclusions. No summaries. Just a handwritten note scrawled across the final page in red ink. Do not open if already seen. He stared at that sentence for a long time. Read it over and over. The syntax didn't make sense, and yet, it did. Like it had been written. Inside a memory, not on paper. Like it wasn't a warning, but a trigger, something meant to surface a memory long buried. And it worked. Because that night, he remembered something. Not a dream, not a vision. Something real. Something that didn't fit anywhere else. He was 12 years old. Ohio, a summer storm had knocked out power across half the state. He and his older brother, Matthew, had been climbing through the attic looking for candles when they found an old steamer trunk. Inside, a flight jacket with a faded name tag. Rourke, his brother, had slipped it on and joked about joining the Air Force. But then, something shifted. The air in the attic went still, not quiet still, like sound itself had been taken out of the room. Matthew had frozen in place, his eyes rolled back, and he whispered a name that hadn't meant anything. At the time, Tessa. The lights returned 30 seconds later. Matthew collapsed. When they tried to tell their parents, no one believed them. But the next morning, the jacket was gone. The trunk was empty, and Matthew never spoke of it again. Years later, he'd die in a traffic collision outside Barstow, August 2nd. Same date, the woman with no past arrived on base. It wasn't a coincidence. The loop didn't start at the base. It had been moving through time like oil, through a cracked pipe surfacing only when the pressure was right, and he thought for one breathless moment he finally understood. That it was about patterns, about recognition, that the presence following Tessa wasn't a being but a recording, an imprint of something once human, now rewinding itself through people who shared some specific code. He thought he could stop it by identifying the pattern, until the voicemail came. It was from a blocked number. The voice on the recording was his, but not his voice now, his voice at 12. It said one thing: you're not solving it, you're remembering it. His knees buckled, because he knew then this wasn't discovery. This was recovery. The memories weren't new. They'd always been there. Someone had just scrubbed them. He tried to tell Raiden. He tried to reach the only other person who might understand. But when he played back their last call, Raiden's voice had been replaced with singing, faint, childlike, a lullaby, with no clear words, just a rise and fall of sound, like breath filtered through a long metal tube. And then the world began to shift. Subtle, At first, objects in his apartment would move half an inch to the left, photographs would blur at the edges, like something just off camera had been removed. His own handwriting started to look foreign. At one point, he found a note on his fridge in his own pen that read, "Do not let her land again." The base logs were wiped clean, his credentials locked. Even the people who'd once talked freely now looked through him, like they couldn't place his face, like he was fading. He broke into the hangar that night, alone, desperate, hoping to find something that hadn't yet been erased, and what he found ended him, because the jet hadn't vanished. It was still there, sitting in the dark, silent, undisturbed. And Tessa was in the cockpit, still unmoving. Except it wasn't Tessa, not anymore. The face was wrong. The features looked like someone trying to make a face out of memory. Like a sculptor with a vague idea of what a human looks like, but no emotional reference. Eyes too wet, skin too smooth, and the mouth, always just slightly open. Like it was still mid-scream, he called out to her. The head turned slowly, in a motion too perfect to be human, and the eyes blinked once before her lips moved. No sound, just a shape. He read the word on her mouth, borrowed. Then the lights above him shattered, all of them. At once, the hangar plunged into darkness, and the hum returned not through the air but through his bones. A pressure behind the eyes, a frequency that didn't enter through the ears but through the memory itself. He collapsed, maybe blacked out, maybe something else. When he woke, it was morning. The hangar was empty, the jet gone. No signs of a breach, no evidence he'd ever been there. Only one thing had changed. The scar beneath his lip, the one from childhood, was gone, replaced by a fresh wound. A perfect red circle, split down the middle. And that's when he realized this was never her story. This was never about what she did. It was always about who had been watching, and now, it was his turn. But here's the twist. Go back to the first file, rewatch the footage. Listen closely to the moment the baby speaks. Slow it down, reverse it. The name isn't Tessa, it's his. It started with a letter. No envelope, no stamp, just a sheet of yellowed notebook paper slipped under his motel room door. 3:17 a.m. While the air conditioner clicked like it was mimicking Morse, he'd been awake. Restless, the dreams had turned. Louder, no longer just visual, but full-body simulations of events that hadn't happened yet. Sometimes he'd wake up with dirt under his nails. Once, his boots were soaked in river water. No rainfall that night, no nearby creeks, just the memory of standing knee-deep in black water while a girl's voice hummed behind him. The same lullaby from the Raiden tape, wordless, unavoidable, but the letter folded twice. Corners frayed was the first thing that felt new, or, more accurately, directed. The handwriting looked like his own, but just off enough to suggest imitation. It read, "We've been watching, you've felt us. We were never gone, we just stopped speaking out loud." He flipped it over, nothing. No signature, no return address. But when he held it up to the light, a faint imprint bled through the paper, a heat map of a human face. Distorted mouth, open, no eyes. He checked the motel desk camera. Nothing recorded, no sound in the hallway. But in the reflection of the black TV screen, frozen mid-flicker, there were 3 figures behind him, and they were all wearing his face. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It hadn't been for some time, though he'd kept pretending he had choices. Denial had been easier than admitting he was part of whatever this was. But now, the line was crossed. Something had breached, not through doors or locks or technology. It had come in sideways, through memory, through rhythm, through the unspoken language of shared images. The next clue came not from outside, but from within. He sat at a diner 3 towns over, trying to make sense of the latest fragment when the waitress set down his coffee and said, without looking up, "We never remember the first time, just the echoes." He froze. She poured cream into his cup and leaned in, as if checking the temperature, but whispered instead, "You've seen the symbol, haven't you? Circle, cracked down the center." He nodded, afraid to speak. She smiled, not kindly. "That's not a symbol, it's a mirror." Then she walked away, never came back to his table. His receipt didn't list her name. The cashier claimed no waitress, on shift, matched her description. And the booth came refrozen, playback failure. But later that night, he found a napkin in his jacket pocket. Same handwriting as the letter. 4 words. Stop remembering, start listening. That night, the dreams changed. He was no longer alone in them. Others stood beside him, dozens, maybe hundreds, all silent, facing the same black horizon. No stars, no sound. Only one shared sensation, the bone-deep hum that had followed them since the beginning. They never looked at each other, but they felt one another. In that telepathic way survivors recognize other survivors. And when he turned around, just once, he saw the eyes of the woman behind him, the same waitress from the diner, and behind her, Tessa, mouth stitched shut with what looked like audio tape. She didn't blink, just mouthed 2 words, "Borrowed, truth." When he woke, the skin on his wrists was marked with bruises, shaped like headphone coils. He wasn't the only one. He was part of something larger. Others had been following him, not hunting dash mirroring dot in the weeks that followed. Messages began to appear everywhere, scribbled in rest stop stalls, reflected in the flicker of televisions tuned to static, buried deep in forum threads disguised as schizophrenia support groups, all carried the same phrasing, subtle variations of phrases like, "You're not crazy, they lied to you. We never left the cockpit." What the government never released wasn't data, it was memory. Found footage from 20 years ago doesn't degrade it, just corrects itself. You were right all along. And always, the symbol, the broken circle. Now appearing on church doorsteps, old Navy jackets, even carved into the bone of a deer skull found nailed to a telephone pole in Iowa. One thread deleted within minutes, but saved in fragments listed names. First names only. But all confirmed sightings. Different states, different timelines, all with blackouts. All reporting, hearing the same hum before it began. All remembering things that never happened. All seeing the same dream. The sky, split, open, and something watching through it, dot. And then came the observer. They called themselves Watcher_04, posting on an encrypted backdoor channel used by discredited ex-government contractors. The posts were written like field logs, but read like confessions. Watcher_04 claimed they had been assigned to monitor Project Backlight not during its launch, but after its collapse. Their role wasn't technical. It was psychological. Their job was to track the after effects, the return symptoms. Symptoms like identity misalignment, not recognizing yourself in old photographs. Temporal displacement, remembering events in incorrect order, emotional echoes. Grieving people who haven't died yet, lingering presence, feeling watched even during confirmed isolation. He read every word. Watcher_04 didn't just confirm what he suspected, they escalated it. They revealed that the project hadn't been an experiment in aerospace engineering or memory programming. It had been a containment effort. Not to build something, but to trap something. And the cockpit the one Tessa entered wasn't a jet. It was a lock? He scrolled to the end of the last post. The final sentence wasn't a warning, it was a release clause. If you're reading this, it means we failed to keep you out. He dropped his phone. The screen stayed lit. The battery refused to die for 72 hours. During that time, he stopped sleeping. Kept seeing the reflection in screens his own face, but older, scarred, with eyes missing. A man who'd seen too much. Then, a package arrived, no label. No origin. Inside, a reel of 8mm film, a spool of audio tape, and a single sticky note that read, "Find her before they do." She remembers the first version. He found an old projector in a pawn shop outside Reading, paid cash, set it up in a church basement, played the reel. 20 minutes of silent footage. It wasn't Tessa. Not at first, it was his mother. Early 80s, sitting in what looked like a classroom, her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. A younger version of her, terrified, writing in a notebook the same symbol over and over, circle, split center, and then frame cut, abrupt splice. The rest of the footage was scrambled, corrupted. But for 2 seconds, the image corrected and there was Tessa, standing behind his mother, both hands on her shoulders. Not aged, not changed. Exactly the same. He turned to the mirror behind him. For the first time, he saw someone else standing in the reflection, a man. Pale, still, eyes stitched shut, wearing the same jacket from the attic. Captain Rourke. But, only in the mirror, he spun around. Nothing. The observer posted one last time. She wasn't the first. You weren't the first. This isn't about one life. This is about the echo they made trying to break in. In the cockpit, they call it a lock. But what if it was the door? He doesn't remember falling asleep that night, but he woke to a phone alarm he didn't set. 3:17 a.m. again. A message on the cracked screen. You're almost ready to come back. Now he keeps seeing the symbol in real-time flashes and headlights. Potholes shaped like eyes. Spirals in soap scum that split. When he blinks, he's not afraid anymore. That's the most terrifying part. He feels like he's returning to something. Like all of this, the mystery, the trauma, the dreams, they're not curses. They're maps. And all roads lead back to the moment he first heard her name, or maybe spoke it. He still doesn't remember doing that. But someone does, and they're waiting.